Damon was a man who seemed to have it all. He had built an empire that stretched across the globe. Private jets, luxury cars, and properties in multiple countries were just a part of his vast wealth. His business was booming, and everyone who met him respected him. Yet, despite all the power and riches he had amassed, Daman felt an emptiness deep inside. It all began 10 years ago when his world came crashing down. His daughter, Lily, had vanished. At the time, Lily was only 8 years old. It was supposed to be a perfect family outing to the countryside. The sun shone brightly, the air was fresh and crisp, and everything seemed just right. Lily had been playing near a river, laughing with joy, when suddenly, everything changed. One moment she was there. The next she was gone. Damon's life turned into a desperate search. He hired private investigators, organized search parties, and contacted the police. Every night, he stayed awake, praying for a clue, a phone call, a sign, anything to bring her back. But as days turned into weeks, there was nothing. No sign of Lily. The pain of not knowing consumed him entirely. The years that followed were heavy with grief and regret. Daman blamed himself relentlessly. Could he have done something differently? If he had acted sooner, paid closer attention, would Lily still be here? These thoughts haunted him. Yet the truth remained. He didn't know what had happened to her. That uncertainty lingered, a shadow over his life. Now, 10 years later, Daman still lived in the same grand mansion. But it felt so empty. The laughter that once filled its halls had been replaced by silence. His business continued to flourish, but it all felt meaningless, without Lily by his side. He had everything, but nothing at all. One evening, as his loneliness became unbearable, Daman decided to leave his mansion. He drove aimlessly through the quiet city streets, unsure of where he was headed. He just needed to clear his mind. Eventually, he found himself outside a small restaurant. He'd passed by it countless times, but had never gone inside. Tonight, he didn't want the glamour of a high-end restaurant. He craved something simple, something real. The restaurant was small but inviting. Soft yellow lights bathed the room in a cozy glow, and the scent of freshly baked bread and sizzling dishes filled the air. It was a place where people came to relax after a long day. No pretensions, no fancy wine lists, just good food and a laid-back vibe. Daman chose a table by the window and sat down, gazing at the bustling street outside. The quiet hum of conversations and the clinking of dishes surrounded him, but his mind drifted back to Lily. What would she look like now? Was she safe? Had something terrible happened? The questions never stopped. Even after all these years, the ache of not knowing remained sharp and raw. As he sat there, lost in thought, a young waitress approached his table. Her auburn hair was neatly tied back, and though she looked tired, her polite smile was warm. "Good evening, sir. May I take your order?" she asked. Daman looked up, ready to respond, when something on her arm caught his eye, a faint crescent-shaped scar. His heart skipped a beat. That scar was identical to Lily's. Memories flooded back. When Lily was 6, she'd fallen off her bike and scraped her arm. Daman had kissed the wound to comfort her, and it had left a small curved mark. Now, staring at the waitress, he froze. Could it be? Was this just a cruel trick of his mind, or could she really be connected to his lost daughter? "Sir, may I take your orders?" The waitress's voice pulled him back to the present. Shaking himself from his daze, he nodded. "I'll have a coffee and the pasta special," he said, his voice trembling slightly. She smiled politely and walked away, but Daman couldn't stop watching her. The way she moved, the way she smiled at the customers, it all felt so familiar. Each small detail made his heart pound harder. Was it possible? Could this young woman really be Lily? When she returned with his coffee, Daman wanted desperately to ask her about the scar, to tell her who he was. But fear held him back. What if he was wrong? What if this wasn't Lily, and he was only setting himself up for more heartbreak? Instead, he quietly thanked her, pulling an old photograph from his wallet. It was a picture of Lily, taken just days before she disappeared. Her golden curls framed her face, her bright smile lighting up the photo. Her arm, with that unmistakable scar, was clearly visible. He placed the photo on the table and stared at it. Could this really be her? When the waitress returned with the bill, Daman finally summoned the courage to ask, "Excuse me, may I ask your name?" The waitress tilted her head slightly, puzzled. "Lily," she said, offering a small smile. Damon's world stopped. His heart raced as tears filled his eyes. Could this really be his daughter? Daman couldn't speak for a moment. His mind was spinning, his heart overwhelmed by a mixture of hope and fear. Could fate have brought him here tonight? To this small restaurant? To reunite him with the daughter he had lost so many years ago? Tears blurred his vision as he looked at her. He had so many questions, but they all seemed to fade away in the weight of the moment. The waitress, noticing his expression, frowned slightly. "Is something wrong?" she asked, her smile fading into concern. Daman quickly wiped his eyes, shaking his head. "No, nothing's wrong," he said softly, his voice barely steady. "Thank you, Lily." She nodded politely, still looking a little confused, and walked away, leaving him frozen in his seat. His hands trembled as he gripped the edge of the table, his heart pounding wildly. Was this truly his daughter? The thought alone filled him with both hope and dread. As the restaurant slowly began to empty, Daman knew he couldn't leave without answers. He had to know the truth. Gathering his courage, he stood and walked to the counter, where Lily was sorting receipts. "Lily," he said softly, his voice trembling. She looked up, surprised. "Yes, sir? Is everything okay?" Daman hesitated, his throat tightening. How could he ask her? How could he explain what he was feeling? Finally, he said, "Do you remember anything about your past? About your families?" Lily's expression changed, her brows furrowed slightly, uncertainty flashing in her eyes. "I don't really remember much," she admitted slowly. "I grew up in foster care. They told me I was found near a river when I was little, but everything before that is just a blur." Damon's chest tightened. A river. The same river where Lily had vanished. His pulse quickened as he asked, "Do you remember anything else?" "Anything at all?" Lily hesitated, her gaze lowering. "Sometimes I get flashes," she said softly. "I see a garden, or I hear someone calling my name. But it's all so fuzzy, like pieces of a dream." His hands shook as he reached into his pocket and pulled out the photograph again. With trembling fingers, he placed it on the counter in front of her. "This is you," he said quietly. "You're my daughter, Lily. You disappeared 10 years ago, and I've been searching for you ever since." Lily's eyes widened as she stared at the photo. Her hands trembled as she picked it up, her breath growing unsteady. I don't understand," she whispered, her voice shaking. Daman pointed to the faint scar on her arm. "Look at the scar," he said, his voice cracking. "It's the same as yours. You fell off your bike when you were 6. I was there. I carried you home. You're my daughter." Tears filled Lily's eyes as she stared at the photo, her memories beginning to resurface. I remember falling," she said, her voice breaking. "There was water. I was calling for someone, but no one came." Damon's own voice trembled as he replied, "I was there. I called for you. I searched everywhere for you. I never stopped." Lily looked at him, tears streaming down her face. "You're my dad," she whispered, her voice filled with disbelief and emotion. Daman nodded, his voice choked with emotion. "Yes, I'm your dad. I've missed you so much. I thought I'd lost you forever." In that moment, Lily stepped forward, and they embraced. Tears flowed freely as they held each other tightly, the years of pain and separation melting away in their shared moment of joy. For the first time in a decade, Daman felt whole again. But even in the midst of this emotional reunion, a dark question lingered in his mind. Who had taken Lily from him? And why? As they drove home together that night, Lily spotted something on the passenger seat, a plain brown envelope with no return address. "What's this?" she asked, her hands trembling slightly as she picked it up. Daman opened it cautiously and pulled out a single note. His heart sank as he read the ominous words. "You found her, but you don't know the whole story. Stop digging, or you'll regret it." Lily's hands shook as she read the message. "What does this mean?" she asked, fear creeping into her voice. Daman clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. "It means someone is hiding the truth," he said firmly. "And I'm not stopping until I uncover what really happened." As they drove into the night, father and daughter braced themselves for the journey ahead. Their reunion had brought them joy, but it had also opened the door to a mystery neither of them was prepared for. The truth they were about to uncover would change everything, and it wouldn't come without a cost.